Good morning, folks. This is the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission. It is October 27th. It is 9 a.m. and this is our normal Wednesday docket. We will start with a roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Vogue.
Here.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
Here.
Commissioner Hackett. Commissioner McGowan.
Here.
Commissioner Mesner.
Here.
Commissioner Nanjapa.
Here.
Commissioner Robbins.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have 6 out of 7 commissioners present.
Great. Good to see everybody. Good to have everybody with us this morning. I see that our participant list is populating up. We've got 44 folks in attendance with us. Good to see everybody. The first order of business is commissioner comments. Do commissioners have comments for the good of the cause this morning? Commissioner Messner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick update on the Western Slope tour for next week. So good news is that we're going to get out of Denver. We're going to go out to the Western Slope. We're going to see and meet with folks out there and do a little tour. We're going to start the tour on Monday, November 1st. Where we'll head up to Glenwood Springs. Nothing scheduled that day. It's a travel day. Tuesday, November 2nd, we'll travel over to the North Fork Valley of the Gunnison and visit some oil and gas sites, as well as meet with folks who are interested in providing public comment to the commission in Paonia at the Paonia Town Hall Community Center. That begins at 2 o'clock. Then we'll overnight again in Glenwood Springs. And then the next morning, we will have our standard commission meeting at 8:30 in the morning in Glenwood Springs at the Hotel Colorado Devereaux room. And we'll have the opportunity to hear public comment from folks from that area of the state. We'll then have the opportunity to travel and visit some sites on our way to Craig. We'll overnight in Craig and then complete our tour as we come back home through Jackson County. Have an opportunity to visit some oil and gas locations there and then make our way home on Thursday. And so really excited to get out and hear from folks throughout the state. And I think it'll be a good opportunity for all of us. And so looking forward to it.
Thank you much, Commissioner Messner. I know that you and staff have done a good job of arranging for the tour. Appreciate the work of Mike Leonard and our staff in identifying localities for us to be looking at. Wanted to ask Commissioner or Hearings Manager Larson, is the agenda for that posted on our website?
It is. There's a link on the main page to the agenda for that week.
Okay. And then the Wednesday hearing, that will be, obviously will be in person there, but will that also be Zoomed for folks to attend?
Yes, it is available by Zoom as well.
Okay. And then that'll be then recorded and also YouTubed, just like our other meetings. I guess I'm just making sure that the normal course of action and how we do our business will happen on the road.
That is correct. Yes.
Okay.
And there is public comment sign up sheets on the website as well for folks that are interested in providing comment to us.
And I anticipate, Commissioner Messner, that folks could sign up for a Zoom public comment as well as a in-person public comment at the Hotel Colorado?
For Wednesday, yeah.
Yeah, great. Well, hey, folks from the West Slope, come out, enjoy, be with us, talk to us. Look forward to that. That includes operators, that includes stakeholders, that includes county commissioners. We'd like to rally the troops and hear from everybody. We're coming your way, so look forward to that. That starts our initial commissioner comment. I know that 3 of us were able to attend another outreach meeting this week. Mike Collon Commissioner Nanjapa to sort of provide some parameters around what you guys did on Monday.
Sure, thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, on Monday, we had the opportunity to get out to the Eastern Plains and go out to Yuma County. And we were hosted by Own Resources and Foundation, which were our two smaller operators here in the state. And we had the opportunity to see some of their operations as well as meet with some of the local members of the community, landowners, business owners, et cetera. And it was a good opportunity to see a very different landscape and a different, very different setup and types of operations compared to what we see here around the Front Range and the DJ Basin. And, you know, just speaking for myself, you know, it's always good to see things in person, to hear from folks directly, and just try to better understand the concerns and questions that they may have. And I'll just look to Commissioner McGowan and Commissioner Messner, who were with me on that trip, and see if there's anything else they want to add.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Gonzalez and I have both wanted to be on the trip, but we're under the weather and not able to make it, as we are all being cautious when folks are under the weather. So appreciate the three of you guys jumping in the car and getting out there and doing that site visit. And I think Commissioner Gonzalez and I will try to do a rain day makeup at some point along those lines. Okay, any other commissioner comments? Did want to note, staff reminded me that if folks are wanting to provide information to us and speak to us at either the Paonia listening session or the Grand Junction listening session, would love for you to sign up ahead of time, I think. Is that right, Commissioner Messner?
Yeah, but not Grand Junction, Glenwood Springs.
Glenwood Springs, sorry about that. Glenwood Springs or Paonias. Try to sign up ahead of time so that we can get a head count. It'd be helpful. Okay, we have somewhat of a light agenda this morning. We normally would move into general public comment. We only had one person sign up for public comment. That was Brad Clayton. But Brad also emailed staff this morning to indicate that he was turning his oral public comment into written public comment. And I just want to let Brad know we appreciate the written public comment. It has been forwarded to all commissioners at this point, so they all have it and will read it. And we appreciate your participating with us. But we did not have anyone else sign up for public comment, so we will adjourn through public comment. Next on the agenda is the general consent agenda. And I believe that we would like to, so one of our matters on the consent agenda is a unitization request. And for some of us who have only seen this perhaps once, I would love to call upon Ms. Stanzik, our permitting manager, for a brief secondary primer around unitization before we take up the consent agenda. And I appreciate that Ms. Larson has brought Ms. Stanzik to the panel. So we'll give Ms. Stanzik a chance to show up, and apologize for the late inning call up here.
Good morning, commissioners. Yes, I got a 5-minute notice on this, so I'm not sure exactly what you need to know. Unitization is provided for in the statute, and the statute provides that the commission approves unitization. And it's unlike a drilling and spacing unit. Unitization is much more detailed. It includes a unit operating agreement that is approved through your approval of an order. And that unit operating agreement is very detailed, again, unlike a DSU, in that it spells out all the owners of the minerals, the actual percentage that they own, as well as it provides for the percentage of any costs that are allocated to the various owners within the area to be unitized. So in this case, it's a relatively small area. It's 160 acres. There are 4 producing wells, producing in the J sand, and this application is to convert a well to injection for enhanced recovery. I'm assuming water flood. Sorry, I just pulled up the application to read it. But you know, the need for unitization is that you take a well that would be producing hydrocarbons, and you're going to, instead of pulling hydrocarbons out, you're going to inject fluids to move the hydrocarbons from the area that would be drained by that well over to other wells where the hydrocarbons will be produced. So before you start moving hydrocarbons around in the subsurface, it has to be well established who owns how much of the hydrocarbons that are going to be moved around. So that's the big difference between unitization and just establishing a DSU, is that the exact percentages are figured out ahead of time. Everyone signs off on them in the unitization agreement, the unit operating agreement, before injection is initiated and starts moving everyone's hydrocarbons around to be produced out of a different well. So that's a real thumbnail sketch of how it differs from a DSU and why it's necessary. So it's not just about production, it's about enhanced recovery, and that involves moving different people's minerals around in the subsurface and extracting them from different wells.
Thank you so much, Ms. Stanzik. That was a great pinch-hitting approach in World Series parlay to providing us with a unitization update. Do any commissioners have specific additional questions for Ms. Stanzik before we take up consent agenda? Commissioner McGowan?
I do not have additional questions, but thank you, Ms. Stanzik, because I was the one who asked for a reminder of what's going on with unitization and why do we need to have such detail, and I very much appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, you're very welcome.
Great. Okay. So we do have the in petro unitization on the consent agenda, and we also have a Great Western matter for pooling on consent agenda. Do any commissioners have any further questions concerning consent agenda? All right, seeing none, do we have a motion to approve consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve consent agenda. Do we have further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Consent agenda is approved. Okay, with that, we will continue through our agenda this morning. We now will take up docket number 2104-00038. This is the applicant VNL Enterprise Incorporated. This is an OGDP, and we have set it up for public comment, which we do not have any, followed by a short presentation from BNL on the OGDP and the staff presentation, and then any commissioner questions and or deliberation. I see that Mr. Prashala has joined us. Good morning. We would then now turn to a presentation from the applicant on this OGDP. We have reviewed the file within the e-filing and within our portfolio. but we'd love to hear from you briefly about the proposal.
Great, thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chair. Good morning, commissioners. My name is Joe Pershala. I'm with Wellborn Sullivan Meck and Tooley, and I'm here on behalf of the applicant, B&L Enterprise. Also with me here today are Ross Warner, Executive Chairman of B&L, Trent Spry, the Managing Director and CEO of B&L, and Andrea Gross, the Project Lead of Upstream Petroleum Management, who provided permitting consulting services for B&L on the application. B&L is a registered operator in good standing with the Commission and has met all financial assurance requirements as required by the state of Colorado. B&L's application requests that the Commission approve an oil and gas development plan for one oil and gas location, the Enterprise State 16-1, for one vertical well on the location to explore for and produce helium gas. The application covers 640 acres in Section 16, Township 29 South, Range 62 West, 6 p.m., and that's in Los Animas County, Colorado. The proposed location is in the northeast quarter of the southeast quarter of Section 16, and the well is proposed to drill to the Lions Formation. B&L has leasehold from the Colorado State Land Board, which covers the entirety of Section 16. That lease includes the right to produce helium gas. The lands are not subject to any existing commission spacing orders, so that the lands are therefore subject to Rule 401. And B&L is proposing to develop on a leasehold basis, subject to Rule 401B. The Lions Formation is less than 2,500 feet in depth. The well will be located more than 200 feet from the lease line, and there are no other existing or permitted wells in the Lions Formation within 300 feet of the proposed Enterprise well. Thus, no spacing is required, and spacing is not being applied for. The Enterprise location is on rural rangeland, and it's entirely located on the State Land Board lease. B&L conducted a site visit with the State Land Board, and as part of that consultation process, Colorado Parks and Wildlife was included, and the process resulted in the State Land Board agreeing to the location. The location does not meet any of the criteria under Rule 304B2B, so there's no alternative location required or was performed. The location is not within 2,000 feet of any residential building units, high occupancy building units, or schools. Los Animas County is the relevant local government, and B&L has consulted with the county regarding the location. The county has not objected to the location. That being said, the county has not yet issued its final permit for the location, which is a condition of approval on the Form 2A as proposed by staff. There are no variance requests in the application. B&L did request a lesser impact area exemption from the Director for Noise and Light Mitigation. And given the distance of this location from any receptors and the low impacts from the type of drilling operations that will be utilized, the impacts from the noise and light were determined to be de minimis, and the Director has granted that request. All notice was properly given pursuant to Rule 504A and 303E1. There was no petitions received, no protests received, so this matter is unprotested. On October 14th, 2021, the Director issued her recommendation, which recommends approval of B&L's application. The application satisfies the Conservation Act and the Commission rules, and therefore B&L respectfully requests that this Commission adopt the Director's recommendation and approve the application. And with that brief overview, unless you have any questions for myself, I'd like to turn this over to Mr. Spry from B&L, who will tell you a bit more about B&L and give you an overview of helium exploration and development, as I know this is kind of probably a novel topic for this Commission. And then we'll also have Ms. Gross available for any questions related to the permitting of that location.
Thank you, Mr. Pershala, for the overview. I might lodge a question ahead of Mr. Spry's testimony that he could then weave into his testimony. And that is, I note from the file that there is not expected to encounter either hydrocarbon liquids or hydrocarbon gas. What measures are in place, or how would the applicant deal with the encounter of such matters if it were to happen? It was just a question I had. Again, this is sort of novel, and Not sure that I was able to sort of figure that answer out, but would love to hear some testimony along those lines as well.
Sure, I think that's outside my wheelhouse, so I will allow Mr. Spry to address that in his remarks.
Yeah, and we can do that straight off the bat if you like. So we'll obviously have monitoring equipment on site for hydrocarbons and as well as helium. If we do encounter those, we will have, if required again, which we don't think we will, there'll be water on site to be able to kill the well if that happens. At that stage, we'll shut in and then evaluate how best to continue. We don't really expect any hydrocarbons. The sort of 8 to 10 wells in the area that have been drilled have not reported any hydrocarbons at all. So with that, and any other questions, please do fire them off. I'll just give a little bit of a brief overview of Blue Star, and again, any questions along the way, please feel free to ask. So Blue Star Helium Limited is the parent company of B&L Enterprise Inc., which is wholly owned by that company. We're listed on the Australian Stock Exchange, so we have good access to capital, we're closely regulated, and we're highly transparent. Everything we do comes under this continuous disclosure rules and can be found easily online via the ASX or on our website. So we're an independent helium E&P company, and we're wholly focused on high-grade helium resources in the United States. So our head office is here in Perth, run by Ross and myself. We have over, as we don't want to admit it, but over 45 years combined experience in the oil and gas game. We both have a long history of exploration and operations in the US. We've got a Denver-based execution team. I'm sure, you know, with the restrictions that we're seeing globally, it's important. And we have US-based support services. So they're all very experienced in the E&P business. They've all done operations significantly more complicated in the oil and gas game than what we're seeing here. And importantly for us, I've worked with the key people in the team previously and the key firms as well, having experience working everywhere from the Gulf of Mexico through Colorado and through Wyoming. Oops. Sorry about that. So just a little bit about helium. Helium is unique, it's rare, it's highly valued. It's got a unique set of physical and chemical properties. So it's non-toxic, it's non-flammable, it's low density. It's chemically and radioactively inert and has an ultra cold boiling point. So they're the physical properties which really make it important and why it's so critical and highly valued. It's important to know it's not a greenhouse gas and it's not an energy source. It's finite, it's irreplaceable on Earth. It cannot be manufactured. It's not like hydrogen, for example. And there's no real substitute, for its key applications. So where is it used at the moment? Aerospace, aircraft, healthcare, electronics, semiconductors, data centers, servers, advanced science, defense, renewable and low carbon tech. So it's much more than just balloons. Interestingly, the US government has committed $50 billion to bring semiconductor manufacturing back to the US, and I think that's been matched by private industry as well. And that's a security of supply kind of dynamic. So it is listed as critical to the economy and the national security in the US, and for those reasons that we just discussed. So why Los Angeles County? Blue Star, like you mentioned, Jeff, we are highly focused on high-grade helium without any hydrocarbons. And that's what we saw at Model Dome in Los Angeles County. So the helium tests in Los Angeles were Model Dome field. There was about 8 wells there, the Cynthia True well, Catherine Mock well, and they're some of the highest grades of helium in the US, and none of those tests came with hydrocarbons. So the gas is non-toxic to humans in the environment. I think I heard Joe mention that we're in a very low-pressure shallow reservoir called the Lyons Formation, and our target depths are about 1,000 feet. So we use conventional drilling and completions. We do not do any fracking of this reservoir. The wells naturally flow at about 500 to 1,000 MCF per day, so they're very low flow rates. Model Dome again proves that helium play fairway and the area. So we've already established some good stakeholder relationships in the area. We have deep landowner and local community relationships. We've already done significant sort of pre-drill exploration on the ground there and form those relationships. We have a priority for minimising surface disturbance. We're working with a number of conservancy groups during our leasing, and we prefer to use local engagement, obviously, and supply sourcing. And we've had a number of our landowners already recommend contractors and different suppliers, gravel, etc., for us. We're committed to giving back to those surface owners via water wells or water well conversions if possible, and other improvements that are important to them as well. So I'll just give you a bit of a high level of the operations. So this is a true wildcat area. While we're in the exploration phase, it's a true wildcat area. Small locations, small footprint, so 3 acres in size, and then being reclaimed. We use flat areas for the well pads. We're using liners in lieu of large amounts of gravel. Small rig size, they're very similar to a workover rig. Conventional drilling, as I mentioned, shallow and low pressure targets. We're going to use air drilling, so we'll have minimum water resources used. The logging and testing in the exploration phase will determine the commercial viability. And again, we're not hydraulically fracturing any of these rocks. If we had success on our exploration well, based on the model dome analogues, we would use skid-mounted, relocatable, modular facilities to develop the helium. The key components in there are simple membranes, pressure swing absorption units. So they're very off-the-shelf, similar to nitrogen rejection units to enrich BTU in some of the areas like Kansas. So there's no amine units, no combustors, so the site emissions are reduced. Tube trailer transport from those facilities, so that'll be trucked, the helium will be trucked via roads, so there's no pipelines required. If we were lucky enough to go into a full field development, we would then run a centralised facility, so that would minimise trucking, minimise environmental impacts, all buried gathering lines to that facility, and then obviously remote monitoring again to limit traffic out to the individual well pads. So that's a high level of us and of the operation, so I can open it up to any questions if you like.
Great, thank you. Trying to find my unmute button. Looking around to see if commissioners have any questions for the applicant. Commissioner Gonzalez, then Commissioner Nanjapa.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Spry and Mr. Pashala, for your presentations. I have a question about just kind of the life expectancy of one of these helium wells. So what does that look like?
Yeah, so one of these wells, and again, we've got Model Dome to base this on. So unfortunately, Model Dome was only in production for about 18 months before the US government acquired it and shut it down and locked it into its reserve back in the 30s. So we won't know really until we fully test these wells, but based on pressure analysis, we're looking at, so we do the models on 5 years and they could go out to 7 years.
And then, you know, if assuming this works right, you guys get kind of what you're looking for, and there's a field to develop here. What does that kind of density look like? What does a full field development look like for a helium play?
At the moment, given the reservoir, the Permian Lines Formation, it's very high porosity, very high perm. We're looking at 1 well per 640, but again, once we do our development, you know, we could see that size drop down a little bit. We're thinking maybe to 450 acres or something like that. So it's very low density, given the reservoir quality.
Thank you.
Commissioner Nanjapa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for your presentations. Very helpful and a very interesting topic to learn a little bit more about. I have a couple of additional questions. Commissioner Gonzalez asked some of the same ones that I had. What is, I didn't get a chance to look this up, but what is the typical cost per BOE equivalent of helium right now? Or the price, sorry, commodity price.
Yeah, the price. It's a fairly opaque market. There's a lot of long-term opaque contracts, but really generally the market agrees that the 285 average price at the BLM last reserve sale is still a pretty good measure of the price. So that's $285 an MCF.
Okay. Thank you. I was just kind of curious how it compares, to the other types of production we have here in the state.
Yeah, so compared to, I guess, at the moment, I think you're $6 or $5 or $6 for methane, I think, or for natural gas. Yeah.
Okay. And so, and given the size of the footprint that you're anticipating after the interim reclamation, approximately what would you estimate the cost of closure to be? And especially given that you're saying potentially it could only be 5 to 10 years or so of production.
Yeah. And by cost of closure, you mean so essentially reclaiming that entire site?
Plugging and abandonment, yes.
Yeah. So really, on a failure case, the plugging and abandonment is only probably 100 to, let's really go high, $200,000 to plug and abandon and reclaim that site.
Okay. And do you have a plan and have funds set aside for that purpose, given the relatively short longevity of the well?
Yeah, we have to continuously keep. We continuously disclose those, so we have them pretty much booked constantly. The other thing, I mean, we constantly raise money through the stock exchange as well over here when required, but we're not allowed to really trade with that exposure.
Okay. Okay. No, I appreciate that. Just wanting to get a better understanding of kind of the overall start to finish costs of the operation. Just a couple other questions. So I saw, and I kind of did a little bit of digging around on my own about that as you also noted, that helium is inert and not flammable and non-toxic. Are there any sort of hazards, or what is kind of a worst case scenario of a upset condition?
In the reservoir?
Yeah, just with the operations in general, with should we approve this well? What is the potential worst case scenario? Just because this is such a new topic for us.
Yeah, I think really it's hard to. It's one of the exciting things about the project is that the gas is so inert. So really, the only chance of spills or anything like that is from equipment, which we've addressed in the permit. So it's really, and we don't hold a lot of that on site. The reservoir is very low pressure, so there's no chance of a blowout. We're not using mud. We don't expect the reservoirs the low pressure. The reason we're air drilling them is we can restrict any of that flow into the reservoir and do any damage there. So really a failure at a plant like this for us is really minimal leakage of maybe some hydraulic fluid and fuel.
Okay. And then, noting that it is, a scarce element, and, that there are, all these different types of uses that are out there that seem to be growing. What are potential replacement elements for helium? I'm just curious.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Our investors ask that a lot as well. And I think a decade or so ago, there was a price scare previously where they actually rotated out anything that could be substituted. So where they use argon, or where they could use nitrogen, they did. So at the moment, there's very few substitutes. A lot of that has been sort of, I guess, worked out over the last 10 or 20 years. Hence the demand and the price. And like you mentioned, the demand just keeps going up. I think one thing we didn't touch on was rocketry or any mag lift, potential cooling for any nuclear reactors. It's the ideal coolant for those because it's so radioactively inert.
Okay, thank you. And then kind of related, again, this is something I meant to try to look into a little bit further, but wasn't sure of. What is the regulatory environment in terms of the uses of helium? Is there much out there? I mean, obviously there's a lot of children's balloons that get filled.
Yeah.
party balloons. But given that it's such a scarce resource, I'm just curious kind of what the regulatory environment is.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what it is really from downstream, for the end users. Other than, if we sell anything from a BLM lease, we have to have a special, I can't remember what it's called, Ross, you might know off the top of your head, but because of the BLM used to own all the helium, we need to actually get a certificate or something, to be able to sell that particular helium from a BLM lease. So that's more on the upstream side, but yeah, regulatory wise downstream, I don't think there is. I think that I have seen online that there has been a few rumblings about why the US sold off its reserve when it's such a critical mineral, but that's the decision by the people, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and thank you for humoring me with these questions. It's just such an interesting topic and a scenario and a situation, for us to deal with. Let me see. Just a couple last questions. I noticed in the director's recommendation that there was initially a location that was a little bit closer to a residential building unit, and then there was the decision to move it further away, which I appreciate that you, took those steps to do that. Could you just elaborate a little bit on what that entailed for you, or was there an additional cost to do it, or additional measures to access the resource?
Yeah. I mean, once we found, that resident was occupied, or became occupied during the permitting process, the extra cost for us was the surveying cost to move it. We obviously tried to contact them numerous times, but that's really an insignificant cost compared to surveying. So that was really all it really took.
Okay, that's good to hear that it was a minimal cost to you to be able to locate it away from the residential building unit. And obviously, as we've already discussed, it sounds like it's a fairly low risk product in the first place.
Yeah.
The last question I had was related to cumulative impacts. I noted in your plan that there was a lot about kind of minor losses, or impacts, I guess. But could you comment on any gains that you might foresee in terms of reduction of emissions or, other sort of reductions of impact?
How we will reduce our impact, or just the operation itself?
Just the like in terms of the cumulative impacts, you sort of mentioned there may be a little bit of an increase of erosion, or an increase of emissions due to the trucking. We've been asking other operators as well, just sort of to also comment on the gains, if any.
Yeah. I think, in general, we are very low emissions and very low footprint. So there's you can't really call it a gain, but we definitely compare favorably. And whenever possible, we're going to locate these facilities, in relatively flat areas, and we can tie them very, very efficiently in and centralize them. That's one of the abilities we have. Once if we get to a certain size, we will then obviously go more to sort of grid power, and then we'll probably start purchasing renewable power using that grid and things like that. And that's part of our ESG plan as well. So that's probably the area we can do that the most.
Okay. Well, thank you again for humoring me with all of these kind of
that's
a little bit
fine.
off topic and just kind of questions of interest on my part. But thank you again. Appreciate it. That's all I have.
Nice. Thank you.
Commissioner McGowan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Commissioner Gonzalez and Commissioner Nanjapa, I think, covered most of the questions that I have, and they're great questions. And thank you for being here presenting today, because it is kind of new for some of us.
Yeah, that's exciting.
So I think Mr. Pachella said that you're an operator in good standing, but when I looked into COGCC, it looks to me like you're actually a new operator in Colorado, and this might be your first well here in Colorado. Was that correct?
For this entity, yeah, for Blue Star, for being an enterprise, definitely.
Thank you. And then it sounds to me, if I'm understanding correctly, this is kind of like an exploration drill, and if it's successful, that there will be more. And I'm wondering if, I don't know if this is proprietary, but I'm wondering if you could share, this is kind of getting, I think, to Commissioner Njapa's question about cumulative impacts. This is one potentially of many, and how big might this get? How many potential wells do you think there might be if you do find what you're looking for?
Yeah, so I mean, it is hard to say, but going back to the density, we're looking at probably 450 acres to 640 acres for well spacing. So it's very low density. So we think, you know, let's say if Enterprise was successful, the target would be ultimately probably 4 or 5 wells to tie into a facility. What we've worked with is looking at this, and again, early designs until we get flow rates and composition, but 4 to 5 wells around a discovery fits nicely into a module, one of the modular developments that has a raw gas facility, a raw gas capacity of about 2.5 million cubic feet of gas a day. So that's kind of the target at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
And investors would be very happy if we find that.
Okay. And I think also when I looked into COGCC that you have a blanket bond right now for 60,000. I'm wondering if you could clarify that's what I saw, or if it's something different.
I believe that's true. Ross is just having a look now, but yes, I think that's right.
Yes, if I can speak to that. Yes, we do have 2 specific surface and P&A bonds in relation to this application, but we've also lodged blanket surface and P&A bonds as well. So we believe we've got 4 bonds in place at the moment, 2 specific to this well application, and then blanket bonds as well.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Commissioners, Commissioner McGowan, I'd like to also add that because this is located on surface owned by the state of Colorado, the Colorado State Land Board, they also require an additional surface bond that BNL has posted. So they have additional bonding through Colorado State Land Board.
Ms. Gross, could you introduce yourself for the record?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. My name is Andrea Gross. I'm the permit agent for BNL Enterprise, and I work for Upstream Petroleum Management.
Thank you. Any follow-up, Ms. McGowan?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, other questions from commissioners for the applicant? All right, seeing none, why don't you guys hang tight with us as panelists? We do have an opportunity for staff to present, if staff desires to present anything further with regard to the application. I see oil and gas location specialist Schwartz is with us. Did you have anything further, Mr. Schwartz?
Thank you for the opportunity to discuss staff's review of the BNL Enterprise State 16-1 OGDP application. At this time, we have no additional information that deviates from the published director's recommendation. However, I'm available to answer any questions the commission may have regarding our technical review process.
Awesome, thanks. And having no further information is perfectly fine. You've got a great record that you've built before us that we've all reviewed. Any questions from staff or to staff? Okay, seeing none, I believe we're at the point where we would look to see if any commissioners have further questions. Commissioner McGowan?
And my apologies, I have a question for the applicant. Sorry. In the Form 2B, it says that all water used in drilling will be reused in other locations during contiguous drilling activities. And I'm not sure I understood how that's possible, given that we just have a single well. And so I'm just wondering if you could clarify what that meant to me, for me. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's more of a, we were hoping to have more than one permit in at the time, maybe. So if not knowing, I guess, how long they were going to take to be approved, if we did get two in, and 2 approved, we may be drilling 2 at once, or 2 contiguously, or back to back, or something like that. But at this stage, we haven't launched a second permit yet.
So then, what will happen with the water?
It will be, if it's not used in cementing, there'll be minimal water on site. If it's not used for cementing or anything like that, it will be disposed of properly. I think Andrea wants to step in.
Yeah, we indicated that any water that is produced, it will be hauled off location and disposed of at a facility that's approved by COGCC. But like Trent said, there shouldn't be a whole lot of water produced. And the water that is produced, it's coming from very shallow formations. So it won't have the same kind of briny characteristics that some of the other wells that you've seen in previous OGDP hearings. So it will be virtually clean water.
Okay, thanks. That's helpful. Thank you.
Any further questions for the applicant? Commissioner Messner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move approval of docket number 2104000038.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have discussion on the motion? Commissioner McGowan?
I would like to discuss increasing the blanket assurance to 100,000, given that this is a new operator that we do not have experience with. I think there's a higher risk there, even though they are on the stock exchange. I understand that. I'd like to put that on the table.
Further discussion around the point made by Commissioner McGowan?
I'd like to hear from the operator if they have any discussion or comment on that.
Would the applicant like to provide any perspective? Mr. Pizzarella?
Well, I think this is something new, unexpected. Yeah, I would like to have an opportunity to confer with my client. I've not considered this matter, whether, and I think in our view, additional bonding is not necessary, given the fact that we've met the financial assurances of the commission, as well as additional bonding with the state land board on this entire project. But like I said, I think more or an opportunity to confer with my client would be helpful. But unless they see otherwise.
Why don't we,
Mr. Chair, may I ask a question that may help as well? What's the total amount that's being bonded in addition to the $60,000 blanket bond? What's the total amount that's being bonded with the state land board as well?
It's a further $25,000. So the total bonds lodged with COGCC is $97,000. And then there's an additional $25,000 with the state land board.
Commissioner Gonzalez, any follow-up?
No follow-up. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Mr. Pizzarella, I'm happy to provide you with an opportunity to speak with your clients. Would you like, could I potentially take a 15-minute break to give you a chance to chat?
Yeah, and I think just for clarification, is Commissioner McGowan requesting an additional 100,000 on top of what's already been posted, or is this a $100,000 total that she's requesting?
Commissioner McGowan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think $100,000 total, given that what I heard was the closure costs will be $100,000 to $200,000, and that we don't have familiarity with this operator in our state. So total blanket bond of 100.
Commissioner Messner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So apologies, Commissioner McGowan, but I guess I'm a little confused. If we're indicating here that the current bond amount is closer to 125,000, are you asking it to be reduced?
Well, my understanding it's 125 if you add in the state land board, correct?
That's right, yes.
So we've got 97,000.
So they have a blanket bond of 60. They have an additional, a different kind of bond for the remaining amount, is my understanding.
Yes, we have a blanket P&A bond of 60, a blanket surface bond of 25, and then an enterprise 16 specific P&A bond of 10,000, and a enterprise specific surface bond of 2,000, for a total of 97,000.
And that may be sufficient. And it's okay if the commissioners disagree with me. If we're just talking about a $3,000 difference. I just want to make sure that we're covering potential costs related to a new operator.
Commissioner McGowan, I would suggest or opine, at least from this commissioner's perspective, is that it appears they are in compliance with the bonding requirements that our rules require at this point. And I'm not sure we have the leeway to sort of ask for more. It also appears that they are, because they're operating with the state land board, they have this additional requirement that the land board requires. So I guess at this point, we can certainly see if they're willing to do more. I see that AAG Mercer has showed up, and I'm wondering if she would like to weigh in as well on this.
Thank you, Commissioner Robbins. I did want to just make the point that in my opinion, the Act does authorize the Commission to require additional bonding if the Commission deems it necessary to ensure that the operator complies with the Act and the rules. That the Act does, in my view, provide that authority.
And under what instance would we need sort of facts to justify additional bonding, AAG Mercer?
So I am trying to pull up the relevant statutory provisions on the fly, so apologies for that, but it's really tied to, so with the Senate Bill 181, the Act was amended to provide that the Commission must ensure that operators have the full amount necessary to comply with the Act, I believe is pretty much a summary of the statutory language. So if the facts here supported a conclusion that that was insufficient, or that, under these facts, you are, there's not enough to ensure that the operator complies with the Act, that would be the hook there. There's also Commission Rule 702 provides similar authority, where if there are special circumstances, just one moment, let me pull up the Rule 702 language rather than muddling through it.
Yeah, take your time. We don't like putting anybody on the spot, whether it's the applicant or our staff. So let's give ourselves the opportunity to get fully aware of the relevant rules.
Thank you. And I've got it here now. It says, when the director has reasonable cause to believe that the Commission may become burdened with the costs of fulfilling the statutory obligations described herein, because an operator has just demonstrated a pattern of non-compliance, which I would be of the opinion that's not something that we are considering here. A second circumstance is because special geologic, environmental, or operational circumstances exist, which make the plugging and abandonment of particular wells more costly. Or third, due to other special and unique circumstances. That's where the Commission may increase an individual or blanket bond. So if the Commission thought that the special circumstances here, if that was met, there is that authority to require more.
Great, thank you for providing the legal analysis around the suggestion. At this point, I would, I was going to call upon Ms. McGowan, who made the suggestion, but I see that Commissioner Nanjapa has raised her hand, so I'll call upon Commissioner Nanjapa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question for either AAG Mercer or the staff. if I understand correctly, knowing that we're going into our financial assurance rulemaking here in the next few months, or that we're sort of in the middle of it, if decisions that are made, now or in the next few months, there may be additional requirements based on that rulemaking that may need to be met following the rulemaking. Is that correct? So in other words, folks who we are approving now aren't necessarily grandfathered into a set level. Is that correct?
That's correct. And I see Director Murphy has unmuted herself, so I'll let her piggyback on this. But under the current draft rules, all operators would be required to come into compliance with the new financial assurance requirements by a particular date, is my understanding. And please, Director Murphy, weigh in.
Director Murphy?
I would agree. I mean, I think that that's a question that you all will also have the opportunity to wrestle with.
Commissioner Messner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'll just opine, and I appreciate Commissioner McGowan bringing this up. I do feel that with the current operations the way that they are, with a single well being applied for, understanding that there's a blanket bond and then additional bonds associated with it, but at this stage, we're looking at a single well bonding amount of about $122,000. And for this commissioner, I feel like that is appropriate for the application that we have in front of us. Now, understanding that the $60,000 is a blanket bond, if we're looking at additional applications in the future, that could be an additional point of discussion on a future application. But I think for this particular application, the amount of financial assurance that is being contemplated, I believe, meets and exceeds the necessary amount.
Further deliberation on the suggestion from Commissioner McGowan. Commissioner Najapa?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Commissioner McGowan. I appreciate what I think your intent is in raising that additional bonding amount, and I will say it did give me a little bit of a pause to understand that the cost of P&Aing the well could be up to $200,000, as I heard. But I also, given the fact that we are entering rulemaking and can maybe there could be additional bonding that may be required as a result of that, may or may not. And then to Commissioner Messner's point, should there be additional wells proposed, then we have some additional considerations that could be made at that time, as we look at kind of the overall portfolio. So I think I'm also comfortable with the current level of bonding, but keeping those other sort of future considerations in mind.
Further discussion from Commission on this topic? Further, Commissioner McGowan has unmuted. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I can see the writing on the wall, and I didn't make a motion. I just put it on the table. So I think we can move on.
Very good. Thank you for bringing up the topic, Commissioner McGowan. We do have a motion and a second to approve the OGDP. Is there further deliberation or discussion before I call for vote? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. Thank you all for your presentation. Good luck to the applicant with regard to the opportunity down there. And we'd probably like to hear back from you after a while to see how things are going. So thanks again for being with us.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Okay. Okay. With that, we were scheduled for a break, but I don't think we need a break. I think we can just move forward. We only have one other matter on the agenda, and that is a update from myself on docket number 2011000261. This is the KPK compliance matter. As commissioners know, we did hold multi-day hearings on the KPK matter that resulted in several findings of violation by commissioners. I was then tasked as chair to be hearing officer to attempt to work with KPK and staff to create a global compliance plan that would involve the adjudicated NOAVs as well as potentially involving several unadjudicated NOAVs for additional spills and releases to try to sort of lump it all together to give KPK an opportunity to come back into compliance. I can say forthrightly that this has been a great deal of effort on the part of staff, on the part of KPK. We have been working toward a compliance plan that would be volitionally agreed to by both staff and KPK that would have components of a global remediation plan that deals with the adjudicated NOAVs, which as well as some of the non-adjudicated NOAVs. It would have components in which KPK would move forward working with staff to resolve the issues for all of the potential spills and releases. It also involves a potential for a flow line integrity plan, as we heard from the commissioners that was an important component toward KPK moving forward within the state of Colorado. It also has components of a comprehensive waste management plan and a spill release reporting and training plan. I can say we've had multiple meetings. I have required drafts be prepared. We are close, but we're not at a point where we've got volitional agreement on the part of staff and KPK. But I also want to wrap this matter up. And I met with the parties yesterday for several hours. They've got some additional homework to do. We would like this commission to, we've opened this up again today because this was the date that we had set it up for hearing. What I'd like to do is receive a motion to continue this matter for another approximate week. I'd like to take this matter up finally on November 5th, next Friday at 1 p.m. And at that time, I plan on either coming to this commission with a agreed upon compliance plan or a proposed order of the commission, which we have every right to do if the parties are not able to get agreement on a more global approach to KPK's work. I will be working with our AAG on that order. I do not know whether we will achieve consensus or not, but if we don't achieve consensus, then I will bring an order to the commission and the commission will act on its own and enter an order consistent with its findings following the hearings on the KPK matter. So I apologize for the additional time that has been taken. I can say that there's been a lot of work on the part of staff and on the part of KPK and on my part to try to see if we can get to a point where we can sort of globally wrap our arms around everything. But I also am getting to the point where if we're not going to get there, then this commission needs to act on its own and enter its order consistent with its findings. So either way, if I could receive a motion to continue the matter to November 5th at 1 p.m., we will wrap this matter up at that time. Happy to take any questions from commissioners on any of this. And I see that Commissioner McGowan has raised her hand. Commissioner McGowan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So sorry, I'm trying to just figure out what we're on next Friday. Would we be deliberating and then also voting on either this compliance plan or an order? And if so, I'd like to make sure that we have the materials enough ahead of time so that the commission can read them and feel like they're at least conversant on what is being deliberated on Friday. And given that we're also going to be on the Western Slope touring, I'm a little concerned about how we will be able to get those materials. So I'm just throwing that out there. Like, I would like to know that I'm prepared for that discussion.
No, I understand. I will either have, my thought process is that, again, if it's a global compliance plan, that means the parties have agreed to it, staff and KPK. I'm not going to know whether there's agreement on a global compliance plan based upon the calendar that I've developed with the parties until Wednesday of next week, but I will have the final draft of the global compliance plan developed by Monday of next week. I also will have a draft of a potential order for our consideration by Monday of next week. So I would request that you print off both and think about both as we're touring the West Slope, and hopefully everyone will be prepared to deliberate on Friday of next week. Commissioner Messner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to start by saying that I appreciate the efforts that you've put into this as far as trying to come up with a consensus compliance plan with both parties in this particular situation. Having said that, from this commissioner's perspective, it's frustrating that we've not been able to get to a point after approximately a month since we've started this process. And while I'm sure that negotiations are going on in good faith, I also I am prepared as one commission that we go into the November 5th meeting without an agreed to compliance plan, that the order should include the levying of the full amount of fines that were determined at a previous hearing without any suspension of fines, and to be able to apply the full weight of the commission and the full weight of the decisions of the commission, upon that order. I think there's been an opportunity for compromise here. I think there's been an opportunity for a compliance plan, and I just wish to express my frustration that we haven't gotten there yet. And in lieu of that, I would like to see us go into a full enforcement of this particular action.
Any further questions, thoughts, Commissioner Nanjapa?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I want to thank both Commissioners McGowan and Messner for their comments. I'm feeling a little bit similar to Commissioner McGowan in terms of the time to really process and digest and understand what we're looking at. And so I want to see if perhaps Monday the 8th might be an option, just to give us a couple of more days when we're not on the road to be able to think through what's being proposed. Though that said, I also agree that I feel like it's really this has been longer than I think any of us wanted, and I'm sure including yourself, Mr. Chair, and appreciate all the efforts that you've done as well. But just concur with what Commissioner Messner said with respect to at some point, if we're not getting consensus, we just need to move ahead with our order and whatever additional conditions we want to place in that order at that time.
Thank you, Commissioner Nanjapa. Unfortunately, Monday the 8th, I will be in attendance as the Colorado representative to the COGCC meeting, and so I would be double and triple booked and not able to do it on the 8th. I'll just pledge to try to get the documents the deliberative documents to you guys just as soon as I can so that you have them ahead of time. I believe you will have sufficient opportunity to review them. They're, compliance plans, 25 some odd pages, but it is pretty easily digestible. If that's the route we're going, the order would be less. So, but again, I appreciate the comments that I've received today, and will, continue to act appropriately. I am also somewhat frustrated that this has taken a longer time for us to potentially reach consensus, but it is what it is at this point. This is, I will just plead that this is a sort of, new approach for commission, for professional commission, et cetera. And so we've had to sort of invent the wheel here a little bit, but we will see where we are. Any further commentary from anybody? Could I have a motion to continue the docket, KPK docket, let me get the number, 2011002612 to November 5th at 1 p.m.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The matter is so continued. That concludes the agenda items on our agenda. Does any commissioner have any further comments at this time? Commissioner Nanjapa?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and apologies. There's some yard work happening outside my window, so it's a little bit loud. I'm not sure if it's coming through. I just wanted to note that Mr. Clefane, who was going to be our public commenter and provided his written comment, I did appreciate the comments that he provided with respect to having the materials, especially for OGDP review, coalesced into kind of one large zip file or something like that. I know individually as commissioners, we've kind of expressed a little bit of a challenge even for ourselves to kind of download and understand what each file is in certain situations, and particularly with the OGDPs. So I just wanted to note that I support those comments that he provided and hope that we can come up with a better way. Also appreciating all the time and effort invested in the e-filing, which I think is a good way to receive documents from outside and from the public. But I think when we need to actually retrieve them and look at them, we may need to figure out a better way through staff, possibly even creating a specific position or that type of thing to be able to package those up in a way, not just for us as commissioners, but so the public can really digest and view them. And I know this is something that other folks have also expressed, so this is not new or an original idea of mine, but I just wanted to express support for those notions.
Thank you, Commissioner Nanjapa. I think we all are always looking for process improvement in terms of availability of documents for ourselves and the public. And I know that our staff is aware of that. I think some of the hamstringing is the fact that we are a state agency and we've been gifted an e-filing system that is cumbersome, but we have to use what we've been gifted. So we'll continue to, and I know staff will continue to do whatever they can to try to provide as much ease of use as well as transparency as we can. Any further comments, discussion before we adjourn? Seeing none, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 We are adjourned. Thanks everybody for being with us. We look forward to seeing you at our next meeting.